Hey guys, welcome back to BullionIQ, your go-to channel for everything crypto, finance, and investment insights. I'm really glad you're here today because we're going to talk about one of the most common questions I get. What is a realistic price target for XRP? Now, I know this is something a lot of people want a straight answer to, but the reality is it's not that simple. The best way to understand XRP's potential isn't just by looking at charts or speculation. It's by seeing what the creators of the XRP ledger themselves have said. Trust me, what they've shared about XRP's potential price is truly eye-opening, and it will give you a completely different perspective on how valuable this asset could become. Before we dive deeper, I want to thank all of you who support this channel. Every like, comment, and subscription really helps me keep bringing high-quality content about crypto and finance. It might seem small, but these actions are what keep the channel running and help me share valuable insights with you every week. And if you're looking for a good, safe place to buy XRP, I've linked my favorite exchange, Upload, in the description. It's secure, reliable, and great for both beginners and experienced traders. Now let's get into the heart of today's topic. I want to start by talking about Ripple's recent business moves because they are very important for understanding XRP's future. Many people still think Ripple is just a payments company, but that's only part of the story. About 6 months ago, I suggested that Ripple might acquire a market maker. While the exact prediction wasn't perfect, Ripple ended up acquiring Hidden Road, a prime brokerage. This shows a clear trend. Ripple is not just about payments anymore. Payments are important, but XRP's real use is as a liquidity token, and Ripple is positioning itself as a settlement and liquidity management company. Settlement infrastructure goes beyond simple transactions. It includes managing liquidity, derivatives, and cross-border settlements on emerging digital rails. Today, we saw more proof of this with Ripple's minority investment in TGM, an institutional broker-dealer that focuses on execution and settlement. This is consistent with Ripple's long-term goal of building a full settlement network for all kinds of value, not just payments. Think of it like Amazon starting with books before becoming the global e-commerce giant. Ripple started with payments to prove crypto utility, and now it's expanding to handle a much broader set of financial activities. The more successful Ripple becomes in this space, the more demand there will be for XRP, which will directly impact its price. Let's talk about where XRP stands right now. Currently, XRP is at one of the most oversold levels in its history, which is really interesting from an investment perspective. Oversold periods occur when most fearful investors have exited the market, leaving the asset undervalued relative to its fundamentals. If we look back, the last times XRP was at similar oversold levels were in July 2022 and July 2024. Both were moments of extreme fear, yet they ended up being strong buying opportunities for those who recognize the value. In July 2022, after the FTX and Terra Luna crashes, XRP dropped sharply. Many people were panicking, predicting prices as low as 17 cents or 20 cents, but those who bought during that fear ended up benefiting greatly later. A similar pattern occurred in July 2024. The market often overreacts during these periods, and history shows that XRP tends to bounce back after such extreme sell-offs. Understanding these oversold moments, combined with the fundamentals of XRP and Ripple, helps investors identify opportunities instead of succumbing to panic. It's important to note that XRP's fundamentals are still strong. Ripple is expanding, innovating, and creating partnerships that strengthen the network's utility. This is why today's discussion about XRP's potential price is so crucial. Understanding the true use case of XRP as a liquidity token within Ripple's settlement network is far more important than trying to guess short-term price targets. The price will follow success, and if Ripple executes on its vision, XRP won't remain cheap for long. Right now, we are essentially at a ground zero moment where the market hasn't fully recognized XRP's potential. Those who understand this have a real opportunity. One of the most important things to understand is how the market reacts during periods of fear and capitulation. Right now, many investors are feeling nervous, and that's normal. But history shows that these moments of extreme fear often create the best buying opportunities. When we look at the charts, XRP is showing one of the most oversold periods in recent years. The last times we saw this were in July 2022 and July 2024, and both of these periods ended up being turning points. In 2022, after the collapse of FTX and Terra Luna, the market was panicking. XRP was falling fast, and predictions of 17 cents or 20 cents seemed reasonable at the time. Investors were scared, but those who recognized the fundamentals of XRP and held on, or bought in, benefited enormously when the market recovered. The same story unfolded in 2024. Despite a period of panic selling, XRP showed resilience, proving that the market often overreacts to temporary events. This is why it's so important to focus on the underlying fundamentals rather than just price action. Ripple is not only continuing to build partnerships and expand its settlement infrastructure, but it's also demonstrating that XRP has a real use case as a liquidity token. The market can sometimes ignore these fundamentals in the short term, but over time, strong fundamentals always win. Understanding these patterns is key to seeing where XRP could go in the future. It's also crucial to understand market psychology. When everyone is fearful, most retail investors exit, creating temporary supply constraints. This oversold condition often signals that the bottom is near, or at least that the selling pressure is reaching a point of exhaustion. The RSI and other technical indicators we look at suggest that this might be one of those moments. It doesn't mean XRP can't dip slightly further or experience a short-term pullback, but the overall trend is more likely to revert upwards as buyers come in. This is classic market behavior, and XRP has shown it repeatedly over the last few years. Another aspect to consider is the role of institutional adoption. Ripple is actively working with major financial players, which means more long-term demand for XRP. Investments like Hidden Road and TGM show that Ripple is focused on settlement and liquidity infrastructure at a level that goes far beyond simple payments. As institutions increase their exposure to XRP, whether through liquidity pools, ETFs, or prime brokerage services, the demand for XRP grows, which naturally drives the price higher. This demand is very different from short-term retail speculation. It's tied to real-world utility and the actual movement of value through Ripple's network. The key takeaway here is that price oversold moments, like the ones we are seeing now, are part of a larger cycle. Markets panic, prices drop, and then fundamentals and real demand step back in. XRP is currently benefiting from both its strong network fundamentals and a market that is temporarily oversold. When we combine these factors, it's clear that XRP has the potential for significant upside once the market stabilizes. Investors who understand this can use periods of fear as strategic entry points rather than panic exits. It's also helpful to compare XRP to traditional assets in terms of scarcity and demand. David Schwartz, one of the creators of the XRP ledger, has explained that as XRP's adoption grows, the asset cannot remain cheap. This doesn't mean we're talking about short-term targets like $2 or $10. Instead, it means that as institutions, liquidity providers, and global financial infrastructure increasingly rely on XRP, the asset becomes inherently more valuable. The limited supply and growing demand create a natural price floor that rises over time, and that's fundamentally different from a speculative pump-and-dump scenario. Another historical lesson comes from observing how Ripple proved XRP's utility. Initially, XRP was used primarily for payments, which was an essential first step to show that the network could handle real transactions reliably. But Ripple's vision goes far beyond this. By demonstrating that XRP can manage liquidity efficiently and settle transactions across borders and financial systems, the company is laying the groundwork for long-term adoption. This adoption, combined with periods of oversold pricing, creates a unique scenario where investors can potentially benefit from both undervaluation and real utility growth. Finally, when analyzing the market, it's critical to remember that short-term price movements are often influenced by fear, speculation, and news events. The fundamentals of XRP, however, are not dependent on daily price swings. Ripple's ongoing business expansion, partnerships, and investments in settlement infrastructure indicate that the long-term trajectory for XRP is positive. Investors who focus on these fundamentals rather than reacting emotionally to price dips are more likely to make informed decisions that align with long-term growth. Let's dig deeper into why its long-term potential is so strong. One of the most important things to understand is Ripple's overall strategy. Ripple isn't trying to be just another cryptocurrency for trading or speculation. Its goal is to become a comprehensive settlement and liquidity management company. This means XRP is not simply a token for transactions. It's a key part of a larger system that can move value efficiently across borders and institutions. The more Ripple builds out this infrastructure, the more valuable XRP becomes. Because every transaction, every liquidity pool, and every settlement process requires XRP to function effectively. A perfect analogy is thinking about XRP like a highway system. Payments are the cars, sure, but XRP is the fuel that powers all those cars. Without sufficient fuel, traffic slows down, and the entire network becomes inefficient. Ripple's focus on institutional partnerships, prime brokerages, and broker-dealer investments shows that they want to create a fully functional, high-capacity system for global finance. When this infrastructure is widely adopted, demand for XRP naturally increases, which will directly impact its price. It's also critical to understand how Ripple proved its utility to the market. Initially, XRP's use case focused on payments. This allowed the company to demonstrate the network's speed, reliability, and cost efficiency. But payments are just the beginning. The real value of XRP comes from liquidity management and settlement capabilities. Ripple is aiming to handle a wide range of financial flows, including cross-border transactions, institutional liquidity, and even derivative settlements. This broader use case ensures that XRP is not just another speculative asset, it's a necessary tool in a global financial system. One thing many investors often overlook is the insight shared by David Schwartz, one of the creators of the XRP ledger. He has explained that as adoption increases, XRP will no longer be a cheap asset. At the time he made this statement, XRP was trading around 30 cents. Schwartz indicated that the more XRP is integrated into financial systems and used by institutions, the higher the price naturally becomes due to demand constraints. In other words, XRP's value is tied to its utility and adoption, not arbitrary price targets or short-term speculation. Another factor driving long-term value is institutional adoption through ETFs, liquidity pools, and prime broker services. Each of these adds real demand for XRP, creating scarcity in a market that has a fixed supply. As more financial players require XRP for settlements, the token becomes more valuable simply because of its necessity in the system. Unlike other cryptocurrencies where hype drives price, XRP's price will be supported by actual usage and demand from real-world financial applications. We also have to consider the psychological aspect of XRP adoption. When investors see Ripple making strategic investments, forming partnerships, and expanding its settlement network, it reinforces confidence in the token's long-term potential. People start to understand that XRP isn't just speculative, it's part of a real solution for global financial infrastructure. Confidence builds adoption, and adoption drives price. This cycle of adoption and demand is what could push XRP to levels far beyond what most casual investors might expect. Historical oversold periods, like we discussed in Part 2, also play a role here. XRP often experiences panic selling when the market is reacting to temporary events, whether that's a crypto crash, regulatory news, or macroeconomic factors. However, these dips do not affect Ripple's underlying business strategy or XRP's utility. Over time, the market recognizes the strength of the fundamentals and buyers step in. Those who understand Ripple's long-term vision can use these dips as strategic entry points to acquire XRP at a discount, knowing that the token's real value comes from its role in the settlement ecosystem. It's also important to note that XRP's supply mechanics contribute to price growth. Unlike assets that can be infinitely minted, XRP has a finite supply. As adoption grows and more XRP is locked into liquidity pools, institutional holdings, and settlement processes, the available supply for trading decreases. This scarcity, combined with growing demand, creates a strong foundation for price appreciation. Essentially, the more successful Ripple is in building its network, the more expensive XRP will naturally become. Finally, while no one can predict the exact price, the takeaway is simple. XRP's value is fundamentally tied to Ripple's success in building global settlement infrastructure. Every institutional partnership, every integration, and every adoption milestone drives demand for XRP. This means the long-term price potential is not speculative. It is rooted in real-world usage. As investors, understanding this utility is far more important than chasing daily price targets. XRP will follow success, and Ripple's strategy is clearly focused on creating a system where success is inevitable. Let's explore what XRP's price could realistically look like over the long term. One of the most important points to understand is that trying to predict an exact number is nearly impossible. Even the most experienced analyst cannot forecast the price of XRP with certainty because its value is directly tied to adoption and real-world utility, not speculation. David Schwartz, one of the creators of the XRP ledger, has repeatedly emphasized that if XRP succeeds in becoming a core liquidity and settlement tool, it simply cannot remain cheap. This doesn't mean we're looking at $2, $10, or even $100. It could be far higher. The key takeaway is that price will follow success, and success is measured by adoption and integration across financial systems. When we look at XRP historically, we can see how oversold moments often create strong buying opportunities. The periods of July 2022 and July 2024 are perfect examples. In 2022, after the FTX collapse, XRP's price fell sharply, causing panic among investors. Predictions of extremely low prices were common, yet those who understood XRP's fundamentals and held on or bought during the sell-off saw significant gains as the market recovered. The same happened in 2024. These historical patterns show us that short-term fear does not equate to long-term failure. In fact, oversold conditions often mark the beginning of the next upward trend, especially for assets with strong fundamentals like XRP. David Schwartz has also highlighted that as XRP becomes more widely used by institutions, liquidity pools, and settlement networks, the effective demand increases. Unlike many cryptocurrencies where price is influenced by hype, XRP's value is built on real usage. Every time an institution uses XRP for settlement or liquidity, it removes that amount from available circulation, which creates a natural scarcity. This is similar to how traditional stocks rise in price when a company performs well and demand for shares grows. In XRP's case, success in adoption directly translates to higher demand and a higher price over time. It's also helpful to think about the concept of XRP can't be cheap in practical terms. At the time of Schwartz's statement, XRP was trading around 30 cents. His point was that as the network matures, more institutions adopt it, and Ripple expands its settlement infrastructure, the demand for XRP will naturally outstrip supply. This is not just theoretical, it's already starting to happen. Ripple's investments in Hidden Road and TGM show that the company is building real-world use cases for XRP, which is gradually increasing institutional demand. As demand grows and supply remains finite, XRP's price has to reflect its scarcity and utility. Another way to understand XRP's potential price trajectory is to compare it to other financial assets that achieved global adoption. Think about companies like Amazon or Tesla. Initially, they started with niche offerings, but as they proved their value, demand exploded. XRP is in a similar position. Ripple proved XRP's utility through payments, and now it's expanding into full settlement and liquidity infrastructure. Just as Tesla's stock price increased with adoption and real-world impact, XRP's price will rise as its network utility grows and institutions integrate it into their systems. Historical oversold moments also teach us about market cycles. Every time XRP experienced a major sell-off, the narrative was often fear-based, whether it was about regulatory news, macroeconomic factors, or temporary market crashes. But each time, the fundamentals remained strong. Ripple continued building partnerships, proving utility, and expanding adoption. When we combine these strong fundamentals with technical indicators showing oversold conditions, it's reasonable to expect that XRP is approaching another potential recovery and growth phase. It's important to note that short-term price fluctuations don't change the long-term story. XRP is not just a speculative token, it's part of a system that facilitates the settlement of value globally. The more successful Ripple is in executing its strategy, the more expensive XRP becomes naturally. Investors who understand this are not chasing price. They are watching adoption, partnerships, and utility metrics. These are the true drivers of XRP's price, and focusing on them provides a much more reliable guide for long-term potential than guessing a number. Finally, the main takeaway is simple. XRP's long-term price is determined by its success and adoption, not by arbitrary predictions. If Ripple continues executing its strategy, expanding settlements, and attracting institutional use, XRP will follow. David Schwartz and the other creators have made it clear that success equals value. We may not know the exact price, but the trend is evident. XRP is built for utility, adoption, and scarcity, and these factors combined point to a future where the asset becomes increasingly valuable. One of the key points to remember is that XRP's value is fundamentally tied to utility and adoption. Unlike assets that are driven primarily by hype or speculation, XRP's demand comes from its role in Ripple's settlement and liquidity network. Every payment processed, every liquidity pool funded, and every institutional integration contributes to the growing need for XRP. This is why the creators of XRP, like David Schwartz, have consistently said that XRP cannot remain cheap if it succeeds. Its price is a reflection of its utility and real-world adoption, not just market sentiment. Looking back at Ripple's strategy, it's clear that the company is focused on building a robust financial infrastructure. By acquiring firms like Hidden Road and investing in broker-dealers like TGM, Ripple is positioning itself as a global settlement powerhouse. Payments were just the starting point. Now Ripple is moving into full liquidity management, institutional settlements, and cross-border financial flows. Every new partnership or adoption milestone strengthens the network and increases the long-term demand for XRP. For investors, this means that XRP is not just a token, it's a critical piece of a growing financial ecosystem. We also need to consider the concept of scarcity and demand. XRP has a fixed supply, which means that as more of it is used in settlement, locked in liquidity pools, or held by institutions, the amount available for trading decreases. This natural scarcity, combined with rising demand from Ripple's expanding network, creates a powerful foundation for price growth. Unlike other crypto projects where supply can be inflated or tokens are distributed unpredictably, XRP's finite supply ensures that increasing utility translates directly into value. Another critical factor is market psychology. Oversold conditions, like the ones we've discussed from July 2022, July 2024, and now, create opportunities for savvy investors. When fear is high, many investors sell, often at a loss, while those who understand the underlying fundamentals can acquire XRP at discounted prices. These moments are not just temporary dips. They are chances to invest in an asset with strong long-term potential at a lower entry point. The combination of solid fundamentals, institutional adoption, and historical oversold behavior makes this a unique moment in XRP's market cycle. David Schwartz's insights help put all of this into perspective. He has repeatedly emphasized that as XRP adoption grows, its price will naturally rise. It doesn't matter if it reaches $2, $10, or higher. The principle is that success drives value. Ripple is building a system where XRP is essential, not optional. The more the network is used, the more institutions rely on it, and the more individuals recognize its utility, the higher the demand will become. This is a fundamentally different driver of value compared to purely speculative tokens. XRP's price is not a random number. It is a reflection of the success of the network and Ripple's execution strategy. It's also worth noting that XRP has repeatedly demonstrated resilience through market cycles. Even during periods of panic and oversold conditions, the network continues to operate, and Ripple continues to grow partnerships and expand adoption. These cycles are natural in financial markets, but they also provide opportunities for investors who focus on long-term fundamentals rather than short-term fluctuations. Understanding this pattern allows investors to see potential upside that others might overlook due to fear or uncertainty. Looking forward, the path for XRP is clear. Ripple is focusing on expanding its settlement network globally, increasing liquidity, and forming institutional partnerships. These efforts will drive demand for XRP and, in turn, influence its price positively over time. Investors who keep their attention on these fundamental drivers, adoption, utility, scarcity, and institutional integration, are positioned to understand the true potential of XRP. It's not about guessing a number, it's about recognizing that as Ripple succeeds, XRP will inevitably become more valuable. To conclude, XRP's long-term price potential is intrinsically tied to Ripple's success, real-world adoption, and the network's utility. Periods of oversold market conditions create buying opportunities, while the ongoing expansion of Ripple's settlement infrastructure continues to strengthen the asset's fundamentals. The key message is simple: focus on the success and utility of XRP because its price will naturally follow. For investors who understand this, XRP represents not just a cryptocurrency, but a valuable tool in the evolving world of global financial settlements. Thank you so much for watching this in-depth analysis here on BullionIQ. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on XRP, Ripple, and the wider crypto market. And if you're looking to get started or add more XRP to your portfolio, check out my favorite exchange, Upload, linked in the description. The market might be nervous now, but understanding the fundamentals is the key to long-term success. Stick with XRP, focus on the adoption story, and the price will follow.